Hello, welcome back to the A to Z of Archaeology. Today is the letter V, and V stands for Visage, or faces. Now, faces are extremely important. They are the key method by which we communicate our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts to other people. In everyday interactions across this world, no matter which culture you're in, no matter where you've been born, your face and other people's faces is the first thing that you use to size up other people and to gain an impression of them. Now, in this way, faces are, and always have been, extremely important. And sometimes faces do survive from history, and we can see them in archaeology. Often the faces of important people survive when they carve themselves into stone, so rulers like Ramesses the Great and Caesar Augustus are very well known to us. Others from the classical world couldn't afford marble or stone to immortalise themselves, so instead they had portraits of themselves painted onto their coffins. These so-called Fayum mummy portraits are hauntingly beautiful and gives an impression of what the people inside the casket may have looked like. Sometimes faces are preserved for posterity. This is Oliver Cromwell's wax death mask. This is the mummy of Thutmosis II, preserved very deliberately after death. And sometimes faces survive by accident. This is Tolland Man, a bog body preserved in remarkable condition. This is John Torrington, preserved only because he had been buried in permafrost. And more recently, faces survive through portraits, this of course being the portrait of Henry VIII. However, archaeologists, more often than not, are dealing with faces which have long since disappeared, through natural processes of decay, or sometimes a ritual defleshing. And inevitably, when we stare at the skull of an ancient human being, we wonder, what did this person look like? Now, because archaeology is largely a faceless subject, archaeologists have had to develop ways to try and reconstruct the faces of people in the past. These techniques have been steadily evolving for many years. Early facial reconstructions were often done by artists, however they are often subject to the assumptions of the artist and therefore inaccurate. However, through careful observation and measurements, Russian anthropologist Mikhail Gerasimov sought to change all of this. This is a reconstruction of Ivan the Terrible, done by Mikhail. According to some, this technique was also at the mercy of the whimsy of the artist involved. In the 1980s, technology was sought to try and make reconstructions more accurate. Archaeologists carefully took computerized scans of people's faces, and then chose appropriate skulls onto which they tried to map them. However, it was quickly pointed out that this approach was little better than simply stretching someone's face over someone else's skull. It was in the field of criminal anthropology that facial reconstruction carefully blended art and science to great effect. By taking extremely accurate measurements of a victim's skull and placing reference points on that skull, it was possible to begin reconstruction. Statistically, each of those reference points has an average thickness of muscle, fat and tissue, and can therefore be carefully reconstructed using clay. Each of these layers is meticulously reproduced by hand, and the technician is part artist and part mechanical biologist. This technique has proved the most effective and the most accurate in reconstructing human faces. This is because we start with the skull, and the skull itself informs the relationship between the muscle, the fat, the tissues, and the skin on top to create a lifelike human face. In other words, it can only be the face for this skull. So it's in this way that many faces have emerged from history which otherwise would have been lost to the sands of time. There are many examples, and here are just a few. Otzi the Iceman is a very famous find. He emerged from a glacier in 1991 and was found by two tourists from Nuremberg. People who worked on this body were very curious to know what he looked like, and earlier this year an extremely good reconstruction was produced. This is the face of the boy king Tutankhamun. The so-called find of the century in 1922, in 2005 an extremely accurate reconstruction was produced from his skull. All too often, famous finds and rulers, often men, have had their faces reconstructed. However, this is the reconstruction of a 2,500-year-old Athenian girl named Myrtis. This is the reconstruction of a wealthy and elite Roman from the city of York or Iberacum. She had travelled from Africa and made a good life for herself in the north of England. And many other faces have been reproduced. This is the face of a medieval knight found buried in the grounds of Stirling Castle, and this is probably the face of Philip II of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great. This reconstruction brings us face to face with a Neanderthal girl, and this is the face reconstructed from a Viking Age woman from the city of York. All of these haunting and beautiful images are only made possible through the careful measurements, work and action of many archaeologists. So, faces, extremely important. Everything from this video where I'm talking to you to when you go down to the shop and you're talking to the till assistant, to just meeting someone on the street and even talking to your family. Faces have always been and will always be important, and therefore archaeologists, whenever they can, do try to reconstruct a face. If only actually because it gives a human face, quite literally, to the past. People connect so much better with the past when they're looking at a face and not their skull, as it were. So faces and the reconstruction of faces and or visage is an extremely important part of archaeology. So that's been the Visage. Hopefully you found this video useful or interesting. If you have any comments, feel free to comment below. If you have any questions, feel free to send them my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address. Of course, please do feel free to subscribe to the channel by pushing the button above, and naturally, please do search out our Facebook page. All you need to do is search for Archaeosoup Productions on Facebook, click like, and often, for example, news stories that don't make it onto this channel will be posted onto that page. So, until next time, thank you.